Hello, and welcome to the CXUX Leadership Forum. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our speaker, Jules Moretti, Logitech. We are excited to have Jules with us for a keynote presentation titled Innovative CXUX, Artificial Intelligence, IoT, and Robotics. Welcome, Jules. Over to you.
Okay, so just as a rough format, I'll be going over my background and experience and also my journey at Logitech. You'll see some ties there to robotics and IoT that will be relevant for this presentation. And then we'll look into how we've shifted away, from IoT as far as I know. And then we'll look into AI at a high level, but also in some details, in some parts, see how, these technologies have shifted over time and how maybe AI could lead or shift over time. And then we'll close out. So jumping into my experience and background so far. So I've been working for three main companies. One called Wet Design, based in Los Angeles. Another one, Frog Design, over in San Francisco, and then Logitech, also in San Francisco. Wet Design is known for having done really large-scale choreographed fountains, like the Bellagio fountain in Las Vegas, or the Burj Khalifa fountain in Dubai. So very large scale choreographed fountains, and with lots of robotics, since you have a lot of moving streams of water or fire, you name it. Frog Design is a design consultancy started back in 1969. They're known for having been instrumental with Apple, introducing the notion of design for them. And I worked as a design technologist there on drone technology, eye tracking technology, done some front end and back end development for them too. And then more recently, for the last 7 years, Logitech as a principal UX design engineer on an array of businesses. And so I'll go into a little bit more detail for those. The first one is an IoT solution product called Harmony Express. And so this is a universal voice remote control that has Amazon Alexa enabled and also a Google Home enabled within it. And with this remote, it's really tailored for your video entertainment system, but you can also control like your lights at home, even your sound systems. And then I shifted to more of a B2B business, working on cameras for conference rooms, and then more recently, gaming. On the gaming front, I've worked on individual products like gaming mice, headsets, and keyboard. And then more and more looking at things as collections of products and even ecosystems. And so this leads us to this next slide, which in a way is a retrospect of these transitions within my experience at Logitech. So we started off with, as I mentioned, IoT solutions for Harmony Express, a simple device talking to a lot of complex third-party solutions. And then we over time, we kind of like shifted away from that and looked more inward and looked not just at devices individually, but at ecosystems at large. And I'll touch on that a little bit later as well. So, why have we shifted away from IoT, I guess, at Logitech and focused more inward? Well, in the case of Harmony Express, with Alexa in mind, when we first started, we were looking at how recipes worked in terms of integrations, and we quickly noticed that things change within that own platform, and so there's this notion of versioning for Amazon Alexa. And the next thing you knew, because these products take a couple of years to develop, Google Home came by, and so we wanted to integrate with them too. And so as time goes by, you have more and more providers to support. And this is just a voice assistant we're talking about here. This is not even the other third parties like lighting or sound and so on. So it becomes very costly at scale to maintain all these technologies, dedicates, developers on hand. And so for one product, having all these integrations is costly, essentially. And so we moved, more and more towards sustainability. So at first there was this costly side of things with IoT, and then sustainability, is obviously very important, has been important for many years for us. And back in 2019, we agreed to the Paris Agreement, which essentially means that by 2030, we would need to reach as a company half of our CO2 emissions than what we were outputting in 2019, which is a very, very challenging target, because every year also, in order for the company to thrive, you want to grow, right? So you want to output essentially more products to some percentage, but over the 10-year stack, that represents quite a lot of growth. So a lot of growth, and yet halving the CO2 emissions essentially means that you have to look introspectively into how your products have been designed, how you can reduce unnecessary things, unnecessary materials, and even unnecessary interactions. And that's where we have a DFS team on board that helps us look or educate the designers like myself into where sustainability takes a role within each of our products. And so things like PCB, for example, could be reduced. A couple of examples of things that are, sustainably costly for the gaming space. They love RGB, and so do I. And so having many RGB LEDs means that you're drawing more power. It's also requiring more components to drive those. And so it is wasteful. So how do you strike the right balance to still provide the experience you want for our gamers, but also, reach that Paris Agreement target? Or another example is on the headset space. If you're trying to merge two audio sources, like your Bluetooth audio and your dongle source, then that requires more complexity from an electronic standpoint, and therefore becomes costly from a sustainability standpoint. So we really need to be very sharp with our product and look inward, and even look back to our users to see how, they've been liking or not liking our hardware. And so this leads us to AI as a solution. So I'll just cover a little bit about some solutions out there for AI. Some are obviously very obvious, but also more importantly, how they've been taking a part in my day-to-day. So I've put three here. ChatGPT, which I think most of you should have heard by now, and if hopefully played with massively. In fact, this whole presentation was written by ChatGPT. Just kidding. But and then we have Midjourney, which is more of a visual tool, and then Stable Diffusion, which is for me a much more sophisticated version of Midjourney. So with regards to ChatGPT, it's a tool really that's helped us for copywriting. We don't really have dedicated copywriters that I'm aware of, and so since we have so many teams as well within Logitech, not everybody can benefit from this talent, and so ChatGPT has come in to help us create some copywriting for example, interfaces for softwares. When you're creating brand new onboardings with new experiences, it may be difficult to get the finest language, the most coherent one that's related to the solutions you're trying to offer. And so with the aid of ChatGPT, it really helps you with the aid of context, kind of craft that very sharply. Another way that's been very helpful for us on the UX side is with regards to research. When we're trying to look back onto our devices and see what customers have liked or disliked, we do look at user reviews online, things like Amazon or even Best Buy, but each product carry thousands of reviews, and so before ChatGPT, we would collect those, but it would be very hard to extrapolate meaningful information. We would have this notion of sentiment analysis that would give you, cloud, like word cloud information, but it was very limiting. But now, with ChatGPT, you can feed a lot of information and distill them down to very rich information. Then there's Midjourney thereafter, which I'll touch on, which is more on the visual aid and stable diffusion. And those tools for us, we've kind of used them as a means to represent supporting artwork for visions. So traditionally, we would create new experiences that has never been done before. And those are not things that you can really Google anywhere. And so unless if you have like an illustration background, you may be able to sketch things, but you'd be limited by your sketching capabilities. So, Midjourney and Stable Diffusion comes in here handy as a way to really paint a picture further. And so I'll dive into these three just high level, just for those that have not seen these tools so far. So ChatGPT is a web solution. You have your chat history on the left-hand side. You have different versions of GPT that have some added complexity or sophistications to those. You have this notion of plugins or data analysis that you can feed into this tool. One of the plugins that I like to use is this link reader. So at the bottom, you can type in your prompt, and you can ask, for example, to distill down an article from such a page. So that would be an example for ChatGPT. But it can do code, it can do all sorts of things. The next one I'll cover is Midjourney. So Midjourney lives on Discord, and that's the main way you'll use to interface with Midjourney. You'll have a dedicated set of feeds, and within these feeds, you can essentially type your own prompt, which can be a bit cryptic. So in this case, you have an example down there of Elon being defamed in some courtroom with some shortcuts for aspect ratio 16:9. And there are many various shortcuts and many ways to structure these prompts, but it can be a bit of a learning curve. And it's also public feed, so you're kind of dependent on the next availability for your tasks to be rendered. The great thing about Midjourney is obviously it's a very rapid tool. It's something that you can use on the fly from your phone anywhere, so you don't really have to have a laptop. But the downfall is it's not something that you control. So where does the data go and so on. And then comes Stable Diffusion, and this is something that I've been using more recently, and I really like. It's a standalone application. It's free, so you can download it onto your Mac or PC. You can use different AI models that have been trained for different qualities in generation. The prompt fields is a little bit more sophisticated in the sense that you can write your prompt, but you can also write a negative prompt, so things that you want to subtract away from the output. You have very rich controls. You can kind of like fine tune the resolution, but also how many iterations you'd want to see. If you want to see 4, 8, however many you want, and also kind of like influence how sharp the response should be with regards to your prompt, or how creative it should be with this CFG scale. And then at the bottom, we have these advanced controls. So these advanced controls are almost sort of like plugins to Stable Diffusion, which helps you enrich the system further. So there's two there that I'll dive into. There's one that's called ControlNet, and the other one that's LoRaBlock. And I'll start with LoRaBlock. Essentially, LoRaBlock is a tool that you can train. So you can feed into LoRaBlock, let's say 100 photos of yourself, of your face, and that will create like a block weight model of your face. And so when you'll feed that in, and when you put a prompt of, say, a person standing by the beach, it will represent a person and the face will be yours, for example. And so you could do this with people, but you can also do this with industrial design, for example. So you could train a specific aesthetic that you're looking for and then ask to render a gaming mouse in that aesthetic. So that can help you generate some different concepts for you off the cuff. The next slide is going to be talking about control net, because I think that's been a very good upgrade compared to Midjourney for us. So in terms of control net, at the top is a representation of what would happen if you did not have control net. So if you type in your prompt something like Barbie girl doll riding a horse. Sorry, I got a question pop through. Okay, I'll address this question in a little bit, but so just if the prompt is Barbie girl doll riding a horse, then the raw output will be just a horse and a Barbie girl, but at any position or any location, they'll always be inconsistent as you keep generating those. And so if you feed in control net, you can essentially provide a piece of art or even a sketch to follow. So in this case, there's Napoleon riding a horse. The control net will look at this image, start to outline it, and then use your prompt to match the composition that you've provided for that. So this is very handy because then you can kind of like orchestrate a composition very loosely and then ask Stable Diffusion to really hone in and polish in an aesthetic that you really like. Okay, so I'll move on to the evolution of robotics and IoT versus AI. And so there's several pages to this. So we'll start with past fears and current realities with regards to robotics and IoT. So the past perception for robotics has been some concern for the last century. People thought that we'd be able to create humans that would replace us, maybe take over the world, just to paint a very dark picture here. And then on the IoT side of things, we also thought that it would revolutionize everything, that it would be embedded into our walls, it would replace computers, we'd just be able to speak to things. And so when you're looking at the current realities today, is that it hasn't done so. It's really just complemented human very well. It's helped with labor. It also helped accelerate business and development of products. And then on the IoT side of things, it's something that's taken a bit more of a backseat and has started to become more integrated with OS levels and some new standards being created, such as connected home IP. And so looking at AI in contrast to these two, like the current perception today is something similar to those two. It's the hardest thing today. It's very intriguing in the sense that we have different versions of those that shows up, and every time like ChatGPT comes up, that there's a leap forward, which is quite grand. And then the film industry is also very concerned by that currently. I live in LA, so it's all around, and people are worried that it's going to replace talents, and even maybe like save money for companies. But in terms of a potential future, I think if we reflect back on IoT and robotics, hopefully AI will take on a similar trajectory, become something that takes a bit of a backseat, and it just helps us on a day-to-day. It could also be something that helps propel the web from 3.0 to 4.0. There's a lot of different data sets, a lot of different disconnected piece of information, and so maybe it can help bridge all that together. A more far future view of AI, which I think we're not nowhere near there today, is I'm sure some of you have seen this movie Her, right? But it's the notion when AI essentially takes on a human consciousness. So the day this becomes true is a day, I think, of a lot of unknown for us, because will AI, become a collaborator or a competitor to humankind, and huge unknowns there. But some, like Elon Musk, for example, are banking positively towards that, thinking that with the aid of AI and maybe robotics, then we can even shape economy at large. So, with regards to a harmonized future, and this is like I think my closing slide here. When we're looking back at robotics, IoT, and AI today, they seem very separate, right? They are kind of treated in their own ways. And so when we're looking at Tesla Optimus, you can start to see like the merge of these technologies. And so similarly to what we're doing at an ecosystem level within Logitech, we could see essentially a convergence in these technologies. And so with regards to new opportunities and challenges, as this convergence of AI, IoT, and robotics come on, we're going to have immense opportunities and also some complex challenges. And as this come about, it's probably going to change the way we interact with these devices daily, and also the way we're connected to one another. And so that means that we need to be very careful with privacy and also like ethical dilemmas there. And so closing remark for all of you out there, obviously I invite you to envision this harmonious future. I think it's going to be a great extension to humanity and potentially going to enhance our lives. I think it's also very important to embrace change and get really familiar with these tools. And I think more importantly, to stay curious. So thank you everybody for this, and I'll answer some questions. I already see 3 on the chat. So one of the questions I see is, do we really have to adopt IoT? The last thing I want is for all of our tools and devices to talk to each other more than they already do. Yeah, that's a good question. I think less so. I think it's going to hopefully shift more and more towards OS levels. Like you can see Apple is already doing that. And so it's going to be something that you won't have to do, but that will come in for free almost with the various platforms that people already are dependent on, right? So it's iOS, Windows, OS, and then Android, right? Another question is around, do you have any advice for someone who is just getting started with robotics process automation for some repetitive CX tasks? Unfortunately, I don't. Being in like UX specifically, I'm no longer really touching the specifics of robotics today. And then there was another question at the beginning, which we are struggling to get our chatbot project off the ground. Do you have any advice for us? That's a tricky question, because there are many chatbots out there, and I've played with ChatGPT for coding, and it takes you like 80% of the way, but the 20% missing, if you're not a developer, ChatGPT won't be able to fix that. So, and I think this is something that's good to keep in mind. Like, these tools are going to be difficult to replace people, because you still need those expertise to validate or to examine the result and make sure to correct basically those mistakes. Question number 4, it's what's the biggest mistake you've seen companies make in setting up a data governance foundation for AI? So data governance foundation for AI, how did they get past it? So I haven't seen Logitech do that, so I won't be able to answer that question. And then how do you anticipate the field of CX UX will evolve over the next couple of years? Well, I think for us, it's been a pretty steady trajectory. We're following pretty much the same process all along. Being very user-centered first, using research, using data as much as possible to influence ourselves and surrounding, and kind of counterbalancing it for the business proposition and the sustainability goals. So I think that process will remain the same, but there's going to be some, I think, desire to be more and more granular towards the needs for our products and the reduction in experiences that are not necessary to meet those sustainability goals. And so I think that could become a constraint that becomes more and more apparent over time. And so there's going to be less freedom in a way to generate products as with some gray area. It's going to have to be much more not just user dependent, but also informed by sustainability and data. And I think that's all the questions so far.
Yeah, thanks again, Jules. This is Nick again. Thanks again for such an incredible keynote. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. This officially concludes the Argyle CX UX Leadership Forum. Thank you again for joining us today and engaging in our content. Have a great rest of your day.